JB here, July 15, 2024. We have about 32 minutes to the open. Gonna be really quick, talk about the market, some names I'm looking at, and go from there. Apologize for my voice. Little under the weather today. All right, so first, take a look at the SPY. S&P up 2 weeks in a row, reversed that loss from Thursday into Friday. So that I think that bodes well, and maybe some chop here this week. This morning, I believe it's 11 o'clock. Powell is getting interviewed at the the Economic Club of Washington, something like that. So I'm not sure if that's going to do much for markets outside of maybe some commentary in regards to the CPI data and data last week. Is that tone going to change a little bit? So that certainly is something to be aware of. I don't think he's going to say anything that's going to move markets much. We have some retail sales this week, the beige book, and then earnings. So we had earnings. Banks kicked it off last week. BlackRock this morning. There's some other banks reporting. I think it's the Morgan Stanley today. I'll have to find out those dates. But then towards the end of the week, Thursday is kind of the official tech kickoff with Netflix. So that'll be much watched. I'm not going to trade Netflix this go around. You saw last earnings, phenomenal quarter for Netflix, huge sub beat, sub ad, but then they also on the other side said we're not going to give estimates and guidance. We're not going to give sub numbers anymore, which is pretty remarkable. Some construe that as net negative. The stock sold off despite a monster beat and raise. So we'll have to see how it does this go around. I'm sure it's going to be a strong report. I just don't know how much meat is on that bone to trade for this report. So the name I'll be looking at is Abbott. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the small caps up 6% last week, starting to finally outperform. I think if they can continue that on that path of outperformance through the summer, I think that could provide a little tailwind for the markets, at least keep the markets well bid as opposed to a possible sell-off into the fall. So that's small caps. Individual names. So the first one I'll talk about is BIDU. It's gapping down almost $4. Weak economic data over in China overnight. And you see all the China ADR stocks are selling off. This might be the spot I might add some calls. If it holds 94.50, 95, I might look to add some more strikes. Still hold a couple of freebie August strikes. And thankfully, I locked in the July calls, right? So you never know. I still think it goes to 115 plus in the coming weeks. The thing with the August strikes, once they announce their earnings date, it should be somewhere in the first, second or third week of August. So if it is, then those premiums on the calls are going to go up regardless of what the stock does. So it's kind of like a double whammy, right? If the stock goes up, make money on the calls. If they report the date of earnings and it encompasses the August strikes, I think that'll boost the premiums at least 50%. So may look for some more August strikes if it holds 95 here. And it's disappointing that some of these names in China trade more as a function of what's going on with the China economy as opposed to the individual name. And Baidu did post a little weaker quarter last quarter, but I don't think a lot of what they have with the AI and what's going on and the charting for ErnieBot and all these other, the robo-taxi, all those things going on, I don't think that much of that is being baked into the stock. All right, so that's Baidu really quick. Square is gapping over $70 this morning, closed up over 3% last week. Well, not last Friday. Rallied also on Thursday. I think it was up 3 or 4% on Thursday. It certainly looks ready to break out. And 70, still some 72.50 calls. I may start looking for 80s into August if it holds its ground over 70 today. Square has been disappointing. Seems like, well, I wouldn't say disappointing, but when it was chopping around for 3 or 4 weeks, it seemed like every time it ran at the open, it sold that off into the late morning and then just chopped around for the rest of the day. So I'll wait for the gap to settle. So if it settles, it holds 70 after the open, and then the rally once. If it holds here or heads higher, I just want to see it hold first before I look for some August strikes. But definitely look for more strikes there on block. Excuse me, I call it Square. I'm used to calling it Square. Unity Software is gapping as well, over $17 yesterday, Friday. Added some strikes and then it chopped around under 17 for a bit, and then found a little late day surge to close over 17. Sitting here at 17.41, similar to Square. It's churned around. It's been churning at a bottom for quite some time, and it looks ready to finally get some legs. My strikes are for this week, so I might have to look to roll them out, especially if it's 17.75 or so. I'll look for some higher strikes. Not going to talk too much about Wing. I closed the last of my puts out on Friday. They expired this Friday as well, so I don't want to be in a situation where the stock has a bounce, and then the premiums start to evaporate very quickly as the closer we get towards expiration. So took the profits on the puts, and not only that, it seemed like every time Wing was getting to 380 or so, it would be stubborn. Then it bounced back up to 390, then back down to 380. I think it goes to 365 and possibly lower in the coming weeks. If it shows weakness today and finally, holds under it doesn't bounce over 380, I may look to get some strikes into August just to play for a move. Maybe it overshoots down to 350 or so. So that's kind of thought there. And not only that, when I get the puts, it's almost like a hedge just in case the market finds weakness at some point. They'll provide protection. But I think Wing can sell off regardless of what the market does. So Abbott reports Thursday morning pre-market. Typically, the name doesn't have uh, too large of moves, but I look at the chart and I'm like, wow, this thing could go to 110, 112, and maybe it sets up for a gap fill up to 118 where it was in March. So I might get some spec lotto calls on Abbott today or tomorrow, depending what the stock is doing. I think it won't take much for it to get over 110, and it's had some moves before on some earnings where the calls did very well. So I think it's setting up for a nice beat, or at least a decent earnings report. And I think if they have a somewhat a decent earnings report, it heads back over 110. So I might look for some calls there into earnings. Of course, earnings, it's a binary event, so risk reward's tough. If Abbott post a disappointing earnings, the stock might sell off. So, and then the calls will be bidless. And then last but not least is TERN. So I don't know if it was this morning, the Wall Street Journal had a nice article on, and I don't even know why I didn't post it on the watch list this morning. But they talked about the new holy grail for weight loss drugs is sleep apnea, right? And I mean, it's funny, all the afflictions that typically happen, it's usually when you go to a doctor and say you have high blood pressure, you have this, you have that. It's usually because you're overweight, right? By whatever definition they want to decide it is. So sleep apnea is typically uh, affects people who are obese or overweight most times, right? So it's funny, just losing the weight would probably be the holy grail for sleep apnea. But supposedly GLP-1 drugs have been shown, there's studies that there's a possibility it could aid in reducing events, I guess they call them, overnight events. So just another notch in the GLP-1 war chest of things that it could impact, right? It's cardiovascular, diabetes, weight loss, now sleep apnea. There's talks about addiction. So I think there's going to be a lot more of these things that come out that point to other areas and increases the total addressable market for the GLP-1 space. But on the talking about TERN, two back-to-back strong rallies. I think it was up 14% on Thursday, 11% Friday. Probably trades over $10. I put on the watch list this morning. If it goes over 950, I'm going to get some October strikes, probably the October 15s. They can have data out anytime in the coming months, and I think even if it's inline data, the stock is maybe it's a double, maybe it goes to 18 on the data, if not higher. And then of course you always have that specter of the buyout. So if they have good positive data, then there's going to be some buyout premium that's going to be added to the stock. So that's it, folks. Let's have a great day. I'm trying to think of some of the other names I'm watching. Earnings, Beige Book. I think that's about it. Let's have a great day, folks. Rock and roll.